And welcome on into the Third Round Universal Fantasy Football Podcast. Right now I'm here with you, Zach Conlon is along with me. Zach, what's going on?
Not much, Fred. Really excited for this episode. The injury bug, we said it has hit the fantasy world, so that stinks a little bit, but we still have a lot going on heading into week 7.
Yeah, make sure that you guys subscribe on YouTube, wherever you get your podcast, and give us a thumbs up. And as always, comment there in the live chat, and we will make sure that we get to as many as we possibly can. And yeah, Zach, as you just mentioned, like the injury bug really did hit the NFL. This is a lot of the crucial panic times for most fantasy owners, and so we're going to help you guys get through it and figure out exactly how to, jumble up your rosters, whether it's trade or free agency. And the injury bug definitely not fun this time of year, especially when you feel like you're hitting the ground running with your team and all, and that doesn't stop of your guys out for the year, your guys out for 5 weeks, 4 weeks. Definitely not fun. So we start though in Indianapolis with one of the most polarizing rookies that we've seen in some time. Anthony Richardson goes down in the game, driven into the ground, his shoulder, comes right out of the game, and it doesn't look good. He gets a couple tests that doing second opinions, third opinions now, but last night, owner Jim Irsay saying he's probably out for the season with that AC joint sprain. And Zach, I mean, just first off, just talk about this sucks. This was the guy that looked like he could be like this Michael Vick times Lamar Jackson times, Cam Newton type player with a Josh Allen type arm. Just talk about this sucks.
Yeah, I mean, that's all I got to say. Like it's a really annoying injury, and it really just shows that, there's so much time in Anthony Richardson's career, but he kind of needs to change how he's playing the game, because he does put himself in a lot of risk as a quarterback, and a lot of quarterbacks are taught certain ways to avoid injuries, and Anthony Richardson has had a ton of them in the first 3 or 4 weeks of his NFL career, and it's really hurt his I think his overall value is fine right now, but as long, the one problem is if he continues to do this and continues to play this kind of way, it's not going to be good. We've seen quarterbacks like Lamar Jackson and Cam Newton go through injury spells because of how they are as running quarterbacks. He needs to change how he's kind of playing, and he has the talent as a pocket passer. He definitely can figure things out there. When it comes to the running game, though, it does tell him that he kind of needs to switch things around. From a dynasty point of view, you got to sit and just hold it out. He's probably going to be out for the year, so hopefully you have other options, especially in Superflex. And for redraft, if he is out for the year, you're definitely going to drop him and maybe look for another option. There's a lot of people that may have Richardson as a starter. It could be a time for a trade. Like, it could be a time, if you're trying to make it in the long run and get through a playoff run, I think definitely it could be a time to look elsewhere.
All right, we'll get to the viewer question that I see in the chat in just a minute, but briefly on Richardson. I'm a dynasty owner, and it's a brutal day because you're the hope of getting that one of those top draft picks and then grabbing him, and he turned out to be this over exceeding expectations, and it was just amazing to watch just the first couple of weeks, and it was like, wow, I might have a top 5 quarterback for the end, throughout the whole season, and that's pretty awesome to see, with the rushing yards and all of that. But looking ahead here, I think that he still has a ton of value. Mike's not in a spot right now where I would be looking to move him. However, I could honestly, I could see teams that are going out and go swinging because he does still have that top 5 value, and you're unsure if he's going to come back and be a top 5 quarterback. Just the arm, because it is his throwing shoulder. We really don't know what that'll mean. You kind of go from your shoulder, and so we'll see what happens. However, I would say that it wouldn't be a bad idea to at least see if you can go out and get a Patrick Mahomes, a Josh Allen, something like that, and use someone like Richardson in a dynasty setting to, try to get that person to go over the edge. Those are known commodities, the Allens, the Mahomes. And while we saw a couple great, amazing weeks of Richardson, like we said, a couple months ago, like, don't know how long his career is going to be, just based on the fact that, he puts himself in just the worst of positions and he lowers his shoulder a lot on his runs. And so not a bad idea. Just putting it out there that it is a potential strategy. Let's get to the viewer question, though. Hunter18 says, start Lockett versus Arizona or Zay Flowers versus the Lions. Zach, what do you got on this one? And it's a PPR league.
Yeah, this is a tough one, Brett, because both these guys have been really solid so far this season. Lockett, I would say, has the better matchup against Arizona. Arizona, I think, the 7th worst pass defense in the NFL versus the Lions, who are middle of the pack right now. The one thing I'll say is Flowers, the last couple of weeks, has really asserted himself as that number one. He really is Lamar's number one, and it hurts as a Mark Andrews owner in a couple of different leagues, but Flowers is clearly the number one in that offense. And I think they're going to have to throw the ball a lot in this game. That's the biggest thing for me. I would probably start Flowers, Brett. I do think Lockett, like I said, has the better matchup, but I feel like I know what I'm going to get from Flowers. Lockett is still, as good as he is, he's still in that boomer bust type of category.
Agree. I agree with that. I think the Flowers right now, the floor is higher. Plain and simple. I think that, hitting the one and all of that, the floor is higher. Now, listen, as far as it goes with Lockett, he's been getting 8 targets a game for the last 5 games, I believe. 7.75 targets over the last 4 games, average. And so, it's not like he's not going to get work. I just feel like, again, like you've said, he's boomer bust. He's been boomer bust for, years now, like even dating back to the Russell Wilson days, where there's one season where half of his fantasy points came on 50 yards or more plays. And so he's been boomer bust for the majority of his career. I would take the high floor here with Zay Flowers, knowing that he'll probably get there. And if he gets in the end zone, then you're talking about a really fantasy thing.
Yeah, Brett, and just quickly on Lockett also, there's just a ton of options in the Seattle offense. So I feel like Flowers asserting himself as the number one, it's probably just him and Andrews. Yeah, Odell is going to get some targets, and other guys are going to get targets. But like I said, I think they're going to be trailing in this game. So I think they're going to have to throw the ball a lot.
Yeah, I agree with that part as well. Thanks for your question, though. Moving on to the next injury, and Zach's was a big one. Christian McCaffrey, he leaves the game with what looked like he was holding his ribs and comes back in a couple plays later and then quickly leaves again and runs to the locker room. Good to see that he was able to run off and not, have to walk or take a cart or whatever. He is getting an MRI. They are doing their testing here. He does know what his injuries are, and he knows his limits. And so we'll see what happens with the testing and all of that. Right now, I'm a little cautious on going out and grabbing one of these backup running backs, just because I think that San Francisco has always made it sort of by committee until got Christian McCaffrey. And so, Elijah Mitchell, Jordan Mason, Tyrion Davis-Price, I think it's going to be this rotating head of monsters if McCaffrey can't go.
Yeah, I agree with you, Brett. And we did get good news on McCaffrey just a couple of hours ago. It's Tuesday now, so they're not practicing till tomorrow. But we did get good news from Adam Schefter saying it's not considered a long-term injury. So that's good at least. And he does maybe have a chance to play on Monday night when they go up against the Minnesota Vikings. So that's a good sign. I think in this game, they probably won't rush him back. They definitely won't rush him back if he's not fully healthy. The biggest thing in this situation, I agree with you. There's 3 guys that you can pick and say, oh, well, they'll probably have a solid day. I don't know how you can pick one over the others. Jordan Mason had a really great game when Christian McCaffrey went out, but I wouldn't put him in starter consideration because of what he did when McCaffrey was out against Cleveland. I think Eli Mitchell could definitely get a fair amount of carries in this game, and same with Tyrion Davis Price. Right now, if McCaffrey does play, obviously he's number one. But other than that, I can't really trust another San Francisco running back.
Yeah, and just to follow up on that Schefter report, he also said that Deebo Samuel, who had a little bit of a shoulder injury, like he should be the same and has a chance to be available for Monday. So make sure you stay kind of up to date just throughout the week, and check the alerts and things like that as they further undergo testing and practice and all of that. But yeah, I'm very unsure about Elijah Mitchell. He just came off an injury himself. And so this was his first week that he was healthy. Jordan Mason didn't look extremely effective when he was in after McCaffrey left. And so I'm very unsure that they're going to be able to do it. I think that they're going to pass the ball a lot anyway. I think that Brandon Ayuk is the guy who actually might uptick if Christian McCaffrey is out. Deebo as well, especially if Deebo plays and Christian McCaffrey does not. Yeah, I'm not rushing to the waiver wire to go pick up Jordan Mason and Elijah Mitchell.
Yeah, agreed. And one more guy that everybody has been hoping for weeks would finally do something. He did it one week, George Kittle. He hasn't done it since. So he's still trying to figure out where he is in the tight end stratosphere. But hopefully these couple of injuries, if these guys are out, they'll go to Kittle a little bit more in this one.
Yeah, and of course, if you have Kittle, you're probably starting him. I don't know that you have any better option other than if you pick like Sam Laporta or something like that. You might still want to go there. And obviously, if you have both of them, trade exploration is a beautiful thing. What it can do, especially these injury times, and especially if you're missing a quarterback like this guy, Justin Fields, comes off of the field and he looked like he was okay at first, and then we learned after the game that he really was not okay. And so he leaves the game. They bring in the backup, and Zach, they come out and they say that he's probably doubtful to play this upcoming game this week. And so now we have a situation where the whole Chicago Bears team is relying on Tyson Bagent, and it doesn't look like it's going to miss huge offense. And then you take a look back at the backfield, and listen, we talked about Khalil Herbert not being able to put any weight on anything. And so is Roschon Johnson the guy to take on the Bears, or are you just staying away from the whole team?
Well, yeah, I mean, we'll talk about Roschon Johnson a bit later. I'm a big fan of the matchup this week. Assuming he plays, he's coming off that concussion. He did not make it in time for last week's game against Minnesota. You would think he'll probably be ready for Sunday against Vegas. It's a really good matchup for him. I think they're just going to run the ball. I think they're going to run it down Vegas's throat. Vegas let up a fair amount of yards per carry to Ramondre Stevenson as well as Ezekiel Elliott. I think it was just under 5 yards per carry. That's a big amount against a team now who likes to run the ball in Chicago. If Fields is out, I definitely think you're going to have to start looking at the wide receivers as well as Cole Kmet at tight end. And you're going to have to make some decisions if you do want to put them in your lineup. That's a very high risk play if you have any of them in your lineup. But for Fields right now, I have him in Dynasty. I'm probably just throw him on the bench for a week. Hopefully he'll be okay for maybe in 2 weeks. I think the biggest thing right now with Justin Fields is you probably have a backup in redraft. There's been a slow start, and there's some people that already went elsewhere when it came to Justin Fields as their starter. So you're probably set right behind them. There could be a couple of streaming options if Fields does not play in this one.
Roshan Johnson, DJ Moore. That's it. That's all I'm starting on Chicago. I don't know that I'm excited at all about the Chicago quarterback. I know that obviously in Superflex leagues, like it's great to have a starting quarterback on your team. I think you might actually be able to get some better flex options to put in that super spot this week. I'm not sure that there's going to be a ton of points out of Badgett. And so, not really that I would go after him.
Yeah, Brett, just quickly, I don't know if I'm excited about DJ Moore this week. Like, you're starting him, of course, but it's one of those games you're like, oh, God, all right, I got to start DJ Moore. It's like, it's a must.
Yeah, and just quick on that, when Fields did come out of the game and they put Badgett in, it looked like they were trying to get DJ Moore very, very heavily involved and throw strictly to DJ Moore. The guy has the ability to get open. So that's the only reason I'm looking at him. And so, yeah, I would take a look at that. But let's get to our next viewer question here. Eric3436 says, should I trade Nico Collins for Puka Nacua? Zach, Puka is a buy low candidate right now, but Nico has been in the top 10 of wide receivers. What do you think here?
So this is a tough one, Brett. I think I'd probably pick Puka. I think I understand the hype around CJ Stroud and this Texans offense, but I feel like Nico Collins, and I'm an owner of Nico Collins, I have no clue what week to start Nico Collins and then what week to bench him. He is just so boom or bust until I see him become more consistent. I think that I'm probably not even going to put him in my lineup. With Puka, you got to put him in your lineup. This is a pass-heavy offense, especially like this week. They might be down their running back. Like, they're going to be throwing the ball. And even though Cooper Kupp's back, I get it. It's okay. Like, yeah, Puka's value dropped. He'll be just fine. They're going to find ways to get him the ball. The talent is clearly there. He's gotten touchdowns in games that Kupp has put up a ton of receptions. Nacua got the touchdown. So I feel like that's a big standout point to me. There's a lot of value there. I'd probably take Nacua just because, like I said, Collins is a bit too boom or bust for me.
Puka Nacua means no worries. I've been saying it the whole year. I think that getting a guy like Puka, that's a top 10 talent, where I would say that Nico is probably a top 20 talent. And so, yeah, I mean, the upside, chase the upside. And there's going to be a couple weeks. Actually, we've seen Cooper Kupp, get injured, and obviously what it was like without him. Now you put yourself in a situation where there might be some weeks where they double, triple team, Cooper Kupp like they used to, and the other guy would get the targets, and so whether it was Robert Woods or Odell Beckham Jr. or whoever, we've seen that in the past, and so there will be those weeks where it just takes off, and that's the upside that I'm chasing. Those 15 targets a game.
Yeah, I completely agree.
All right, so now let's jump over to our last injury update here. It is David Montgomery, and Zach, this was another brutal one, and it was something that Montgomery dealt with pretty much a couple weeks ago, where he took a thigh to the chest, and they said, oh, it's a rib injury, and he's going to miss some time. Well, now he's going to miss some more time, it looks like. What exactly does this mean for a guy like Jahmyr Gibbs or maybe even Craig Reynolds?
So the biggest thing for me, I'm a Gibbs owner in about 4 leagues. Half of the leagues, I'm like, okay, maybe I'll just throw him in as a flex play. And the other ones, I just have a built roster around. So I won't be starting Jahmyr Gibbs. I think a lot of Jahmyr Gibbs owners have seen that and probably have made a move or just found other guys on their roster that they could maybe trust a little bit more, maybe even grab the guy on the waiver wire. I think for this week, it's a tough matchup against Baltimore. I don't know if he's going to be great in this one, just because Baltimore, I'm worried about Baltimore's offense a little bit. I have no worries about their defense. They're one of the best in the NFL easily. They have a lot of really good guys on the line, and it's going to be a tough matchup for Gibbs. I would probably put Gibbs in flex consideration. It just depends on who you have on your roster. But as for Montgomery, this definitely hurts. I think the positive you can take out of it is you drafted David Montgomery a little bit later than most guys, most really top 10 and top 15 running backs. So you probably have a couple on your roster. You're probably set there. You just have to plan for maybe bye weeks coming up. That may be a little bit tough. Could look to the waiver wire or just try and trade. It's always really smart to keep upgrading.
Yeah, in our redraft, he went one of round 7 that I was able to take him there. And so, yeah, I mean, it's not exactly a guy that I was like looking to be my top tier running back. Like he was a depth guy. And yeah, the consensus early in the year was, or preseason was, oh, he's going to be this big time gadget guy and he's going to get all the PPR stuff and Monty will get the Jamal Williams role. Well, it sort of kind of ended up being like, but on steroids. And it was like, okay, well, Monty's getting the Jamal Williams role, and he's also getting an extra 10 or 15 carries than what Jamal Williams got. And Gibbs really, we've seen the snap counts, and they've been fine. It's not like there's nothing against what Gibbs is doing. It's just you're not getting the touchdowns. You're not getting the upside from a fantasy football perspective. Dan Campbell doesn't care. He's winning football games. He doesn't care about the fantasy football aspect. And the owners of Jahmyr Gibbs in fantasy football. That said, I think that this will sort of help Gibbs. I think that, having the unproduction that he did when Monty was out those first couple weeks, and I think he really took notice about that. And so I think there will be a much improved Jahmyr Gibbs on the rush. I think it was also a bit of an eye-opener for how they were utilizing him when Monty was out. So I think that changes a little bit. I'm looking for more of those dump-off passes and, kind of an Alvin Kamara type role like we know that he could be, but actually using him in both, not only as a rusher, but a pass catcher, which we really haven't seen because of Monty.
Yeah, I mean, it could be an opening and maybe a bright spot for Gibbs. I feel like I need to probably see a week or two before, and I know Montgomery's going to miss some time. We don't know the exact amount, but when Monty was out the first time, Gibbs came in, was number 1, and it was not a great week. I feel like I don't know if I'm getting the best week this week from Jahmyr Gibbs just because of that Baltimore front. I feel like in this game, Detroit will probably be throwing the ball a little bit more. They trust Jared Goff a lot. They trust the weapons with Sam Laporta as well as Amon-Ra. They're all healthy. They're going to keep getting them the ball. Gibbs will do his thing. I don't know if it's going to be a fantastic week this week.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that they're really going to run the ball a lot. I think that, they figured out that, hey, we can do the play and pass a lot. And so, yeah, that's where I kind of see the PPR Alvin Kamara type role of Gibbs coming to fruition, because I think that they really figured out, hey, that play action works a lot when you run it, and then all of a sudden, it opens up the whole middle of the field because they're going to run it again. That's where guys like Amon-Ra, guys like Jameson Williams, we saw that awesome touchdown over the weekend, and that's where those kind of plays really can just get opened up completely by the defense, because the defense commits a little too much to the run. And that's sort of the bread and butter of what's made this Lions offense so great.
Yeah, Brett, definitely. And Gibbs, you said obviously the comparisons all along where Alvin Kamara, we see the targets that Alvin Kamara is getting in the Saints offense right now. Hopefully Gibbs can get that in the next couple of weeks while Montgomery is out.
Yeah, and pretty good transition there. A guy who did get a lot of targets and is our first standout for the week. He got 15. It was Amon-Ra St. Brown, 12 of 15 targets, 124 yards and a touchdown. They get the win over the Buccaneers. And Zach, I mean, Amon-Ra, we were sort of a little iffy on a couple weeks ago on Amon-Ra. He kind of proved it wrong that, he can be that top number 1 receiver.
Yeah, I mean, the one worry was he was getting the targets, he was getting the volume. Could he turn it into touchdowns? That's still even he's looking to get in the end zone a little bit more, but the volume is unbelievable what this guy's able to get. 15 targets against this Tampa Bay defense. who hasn't been great this year, but still, I mean, they got some tough players on that defense, and Amon-Ra made them look silly this weekend. 12 receptions on 15 targets, 124 yards, and the touchdown. What a week for Amon-Ra, and I think it's just a signal for weeks to come. He's a really, really dangerous target. And this Detroit offense, they keep winning a ton of games. They're going to keep throwing the ball. They're going to keep going to what's made them successful. And now with Monty out, they're going to keep throwing the ball around.
Yeah, and I think that, with Amon-Ra, this is the first time I believe, or the second time this season that he got double-digit targets. It is the first time this season that he's placed in top and fantasy among wide receivers. And so he finished as wide receiver 1. Very awesome to see. And, obviously this is now the second straight game that he has played. Obviously he missed week 5, but it's the second straight game that he played where he scored a touchdown. And so, yeah, I think that the results for him, the top 10 receiver, definitely are there for the rest of the season, especially if the volume now starts to get this bit of an uptick. But yeah, as far as it goes with the Lions, like we talked about, that play action pass is pretty deadly. And so, to be able to utilize that, and when he does come back, I'm not envisioning he's going to be out for so long. They can go back to that a bit. But a guy that also did pretty well this week was Raheem Mostert. He scored 3 touchdowns and basically rushed for 115 yards, 2 touchdowns on 17 carries. 3 catches for 17 yards, and added a receiving touchdown to that. Zach, with, Achane out, we talked about like Mostert has the potential to be a top 10 running back. Do you think that continues as long as he's out? And even with Achane in, do you think that he can continue to produce that top tier running backers?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing with Mostert was he going to get most of the touches? Yeah, he did. He got 17 rushing attempts, turned it into 115 yards. Obviously, the matchup was great. He was going up against this Carolina defense that's struggled mightily against the run this year. And turned it into 2 touchdowns as well. This guy getting targets out of the backfield is also huge. This is a pass-heavy offense. We know it. And but the biggest thing is they're a pass-heavy offense, but they also kill you in the running game. They're just so good everywhere. So it's a really, really good offense to be in right now. Mostert is clearly the guy while Achane is out. I'm not worried. He's literally a set it and forget it starter. Raheem, one of our favorites, Raheem must start. He is a must start right now as long as Achane is out.
Yeah, and credit to fantasy analyst Matthew Berry on that one, who, for years has called him Raheem must start. This is the third time that Raheem Mostert finished in the top 5 running backs, just getting multiple touchdowns every single game. And I think that's the more significant thing, is that not only is he adding these ridiculous runs in, but he's getting touchdowns and he's getting into the end zone. And so, as long as they keep doing that, they keep piling on the points, he's going to be a top 10 running back by the end of the year. Even Achane in there, I think that, the two of them together are forming this ridiculous duo that we really haven't seen, at least, I don't even know, like Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb. Is that the last duo that really they did that and were top 20 options?
Yeah, I mean, you'd have to say so. They were consistent as top 20 guys. I think the biggest thing for Mostert right now is the scoring. If he gets touchdowns, that shoots your fantasy value way up. He has 9 rushing touchdowns, Brett, in 6 games. 9 rushing touchdowns. Who would have ever thought that we'd be saying that at the start of the season? 9 rushing touchdowns plus 2 in the receiving game, in the passing game. Unbelievable what he's been able to do so far this year. You got to keep starting him. Right? You picked a gem if you got Raheem Mostert.
Yeah, pretty crazy that it was a guy that was getting at the end of drafts, and so there's been a few of them this year that have gone off, and we just talked about Puka Nacua, who wasn't really picked in many drafts, picked off waivers unless you picked him in a rookie draft, but it was Cooper Kupp who once again came back his second game out, puts up an amazing stat line, 7 catches on 9 targets, 148 yards and a touchdown, finishes as wide receiver 4 a week. Zach, listen, we talked about Puka and his impact, but if you have Cooper Kupp and you're on those struggling teams, we were just talking off air about this, like it sort of makes sense that you could flip him and get a ton of value for him.
Get rid of him. Do it. Like, get rid of him. He has a ton of value. You could get a ton for him. Running backs, wide receivers. If you need depth, I mean, trade Cooper Kupp right now. This guy is unbelievable, and I'm expecting like a maybe one of those memes or of course one of those guys when they come back from injury from so long, he's like, "Yep, I'm back. I missed nothing." Same old Cooper Kupp, like a ton of targets, had 9 of them over the weekend, 7 receptions, 148 yards, Brett. That's just unbelievable. Plus the touchdown. He's back to normal, like a top 5 wide receiver. Like as long as he's healthy and as long as Matthew Stafford's healthy, they're going to keep throwing the ball to each other. Like he's going to keep getting a ton of targets. He's got a lot of value now. And I'm very happy. I drafted Cooper Kupp in the 4th round of one of my drafts. And now all of a sudden I'm a championship type contender. Like it's really unbelievable what he's been able to do in the last couple of weeks. And like you said, though, Brett, if you're struggling, a guy like Cooper Kupp has a ton of value. You definitely should offload him.
Yeah, because you could probably get, multiple talents on your team, fill it out. We actually saw him get traded in our Dynasty League, which I thought was pretty interesting. Just because his value is so high right now, you could get a first pick plus. And I believe Adam Thielen was part of that deal. Like, yeah, there's a lot that goes into trading a guy like Kupp, especially if you're one of those, rebuilders and you don't think Cooper Kupp's going to be there for a long-term future. And that's all valid and staff and all of that. So, yeah, I think that right now Cooper Kupp, his value is super high. It's a guy that you could potentially sell high on.
Yeah, I completely agree. What a start to the coming back from injury for Cooper Kupp, Brett.
Let's get to our viewer question here. Traded Drake and Hollywood for Justin Jefferson. Did he win it or lose it?
Oh, he won that. I did people. Oh, all right. Yeah. Justin Jefferson. He's out with an injury. Like Justin Jefferson's going to come back. You think Justin Jefferson hasn't heard all the noise and that the Vikings are struggling and that, his production's not as high as it has been in previous years. This guy's going to come back from injury. He will be just fine. Like, and trading Drake London and Hollywood Brown, who, they've been consistent. They're not Justin Jefferson.
Yeah, I think this is one of those where on the stretch, and they said 4 to 6 weeks. I agree with that. I think that this is a guy who he'll probably get paid by the time he comes back. That's sort of fair to say, and we've heard a lot of noise about the contract and all of that, and he's trying to protect himself. All valid. I think that's done pretty easy. I think they were ready to offer him money already. So I think Jefferson's back for that stretch run. It's a guy who, listen, they have a week 13 bye, but right through into the playoffs there. It's a guy who could potentially just win you single-handedly your league, just because of the floor being so high when he's rolling. And he's going to take his time with his injury. Obviously, he's not going to root himself back, but at the same time, seems like that's not too much of an issue. I would say it's an absolute slam dunk win. You got the best wide receiver, no matter what anybody says. Listen, it was when we talked about Jonathan Taylor a few weeks ago. He is the top running back in the league. You could argue Christian McCaffrey, just based on the last couple of weeks. But, as far as Jonathan Taylor's value went, and he was in contract and all that, you knew that when you were getting him healthy on the field, he's going to produce that at a number. And we're starting to see that number turn off in Indianapolis. So, I agree. It's a total slam dunk win for grabbing Justin Jefferson, grabbing the top guy.
Yep, definitely, Brett.
All right, so now just a quick shout out, Zach. You wanted to give a quick shout out here to Adam Thielen. Take it away.
Oh, what a guy. What a guy. I have Adam Thielen in 4 fantasy leagues. I won every single one of them. I had a great week of fantasy football, and thank you to Adam Thielen. He was a monster. Bryce Young, you're my hero for continuing to throw the ball to him. And the biggest thing I'll say is they keep losing and they're in garbage time. Adam Thielen gets more grabs than absolutely anybody in fantasy football in garbage time. What a week for him. 13 targets, Brett. 13.
Yeah, unbelievable. And 11 of them were catches, which I think is another important thing. It's the third time that he's gotten double-digit targets and finished with double-digit catches. The efficiency is pretty amazing. For him, it's the third time this season he's also had triple digits in receiving yards, and he finishes as the wide receiver number 2 after he finished receiver number 4 the previous week, a couple weeks before he finished as wide receiver 3. So he's just rolling. And I think that they're figuring out ways to get him open, get him the ball. He's been just this ultimate safety blanket for a rookie quarterback, and he looks to continue it about the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, so it's so sad though. He's on a bye this week. I got a break.
I know. That's a bummer. And as we get into Buymageddon, let's just list off some teams here: Carolina, Cincinnati, Dallas, Houston, the Jets, and Tennessee. All of those teams are on buys, and so we're going to break down some of the games from this week and give you guys options of who you might want to go pick up, who you might want to drop and go trade for, buy low, all of that. Zach, let's start it out. There is no London game this week, which was quite a bummer, but we will start out Thursday Night Football. Jacksonville travels to New Orleans. Zach, and Trevor Lawrence here has been going up and down, up and down. I feel like he's sort of settled out, though, in the week.
Yeah, no, definitely, Brett. The last couple of weeks, he's been really solid. They've had 2 big wins over Indianapolis and Buffalo, and he's looked really good. The other guy who's looked really good is Travis Etienne out of the backfield. Back-to-back weeks in the top 3 of fantasy running backs. Really, really solid production for him each and every week. So that's really good to see for both of them. And I mean, even in the passing game, like Calvin Ridley has been just on and off and on and off. I think it's going to come at some point, Brett. They're really going to lock it down. They know the talent that Calvin Ridley has, and they'll definitely get him the ball more. The targets have been good. They just haven't turned into receptions enough. So I feel like maybe a couple more weeks, that chemistry between him and Trevor Lawrence will really come to fruition. But while that's happening, Christian Kirk is putting up solid numbers again each and every week, and another solid output. Got the touchdown for Jacksonville the other day, and a really solid week as well for Evan Ingram. Those 5 guys, I'm really confident in starting them, even though it's a tough matchup against New Orleans. I think those guys are definitely starting in your lineup.
Yeah, a guy like Evan Ingram got a ton of volume, 7 catches, 7 targets, 41 yards, didn't score a touchdown. And, obviously you root for that from the tight end boomer bust sort of stand, but, you got to be happy with kind of an output. And then, yeah, as far as ETN goes, dude's being a beast right now and scoring touchdowns. And so, again, like we reiterated last week, like that Tank Bigsby is going to be a thing. Like he had 3 carries for 2 yards. And so I think that ETN full force has taken this over. We saw it with James Robinson, and we saw what James Robinson has become in the last year and a half. And so I think that not to forecast Tank Bigsby's future, but I don't think that there's going to be too much of an impact, compared to Travis Etienne's workload. I think that he's kind of the lead guy right now. He's one of the top running backs in all fantasy football. And it's a guy that a lot of people are trying to get in like Dynasty. And, if you're an ETN owner, I would say probably hold for now, or ask for the moon, obviously.
Yeah, I completely agree. There's definitely a ton of value there, but there's no reason to give him up. Like he is rolling right now, and you have him for the next couple of years. Like he's so young, still a lot of time in the NFL. And especially while he's rolling right now, no reason to really go elsewhere on him.
Yes, and now just moving over to New Orleans, and it was an okay game for Derek Carr. Listen, he's not always going to have these top tier amazing games. He still finishes as a top 10 quarterback, 303 passing yards. He had a touchdown, and so did throw an interception. Said, it's your average Derek Carr game. Nothing amazing, nothing too awful. It just was an average game. Finishes as the top 10 quarterback, like I said. Pretty good streaming option. It's not a guy who's owned in a ton of leagues. And so, I believe he's only rostered in 25% of Yahoo leagues. So if you are on a buy, it's potentially a person you can go out and pick up and stat and, just put him right into your lineup this week against Jacksonville.
Yeah, definitely a streaming option to really look out for. And when it comes to New Orleans, like Alvin Kamara has had a great start. If you're a Kamara owner, you're really happy with how this season has started. And since he came back from suspension, of course, that it does help that Jamal Williams was on IR. He may be coming back in the next couple of weeks. I don't know how much that affects Kamara, though. I think he's proven that he can be the workhorse back and be that lead guy in that running back room down in New Orleans. When it comes to the wide receivers, I was a little bit worried. I'm going to be honest, Brett, about Chris Olave after just it's not been great. But I feel like the volume has proven to me that, okay, it's always going to be there. How many targets he gets per game is huge to me. And it proves that, all right, they're looking for him. They're trying to link up. And they did so pretty well this week. They had 7 receptions for 96 yards. The one thing is, if he can turn the volume plus touchdowns, he could definitely have a ton of upside. It's just one week he has volume, and then the other week he has maybe a touchdown and not a lot of volume. They need to be a little bit more consistent there. I think I wouldn't put Olave in buy low just because of what he was able to do last week. But it could be a guy, if you're looking for a bigger option, he could be a guy to maybe dish out.
Yeah, I think that, as far as the receivers go, Raheem Shaheed, I think that's a very deep sleeper. We'll talk about him a little bit later. 2 catches, 85 yards, touchdown. Obviously, Olave. Listen, Olave has been one of these guys that, he dipped into nothingness just in the last few weeks. I think it's a guy you can actually go out and buy super low for right now. Give up those depth options. I think that there's going to be weeks where he just starts to turn the corner and goes off. But Michael Thomas, I think right now is the more surprising thing because his floor is very high. And it's a big surprise for me because, you kind of thought Michael Thomas, hey, back when the season first started, it was like we didn't think he was going to stay healthy. I mean, let's be honest. We didn't think he was going to stay healthy. He's making these amazing cuts and he's getting targets. He's getting the ball, making catches. Just needs to sort of add those touchdowns in. Those will come. But as far as Michael Thomas's value goes, like I feel like that's a guy I might also target who's still kind of low, but you also know that you're going to get a steady flex option every single week. So it might be a guy that you go out and trade for, a couple bench guys, guys who probably won't ever be in your lineup for a guy like a Michael Thomas, where it's someone that isn't getting the production. As far as Kamara goes, though, yeah, guy's a beast. He's getting a lot of work. I mean, what could you say? He's getting the receiving. He's getting the rushing, and so, yeah, I mean, he's awesome.
Yeah, I agree, Brett. The one thing I'll say, because I am an Olave owner in a couple of different leagues, I would, like I said, I think I don't know if I put him in buy low after last week because the targets are there. The one thing I will say to maybe boost some confidence of Olave owners, almost every single week, Michael Thomas has been putting up some good numbers. Chris Olave has still put up nearly and sometimes more the targets of Michael Thomas. Like he's always had maybe more targets than Thomas does in a week. I think that's leads Olave owners to a little bit of optimism that, okay, yeah, Michael Thomas is not really taking over. It's just they need to work on that chemistry, Carr as well as Olave.
Yeah, so now let's jump over to our next matchup as we have Indianapolis take on Cleveland Sunday, 1 o'clock. Zach, let's just break this down a little bit in terms of Indianapolis. I mean, Gardner Minshew has kind of got his guys, and it seems to be Michael Pittman and Josh Downs.
And that's fine. That's fine. As fantasy owners, you love to see that. Michael Pittman, you wouldn't even know that he was missing his top quarterback because Gardner Minshew's filled in perfectly fine. He had 9 receptions, Pittman, this last week on 14 targets. Almost 15 targets for Pittman for 109 yards. Didn't get in the end zone, but the volume is so helpful to Pittman owners right now. And it definitely a guy to keep a hold of because he definitely is going to get those targets as long as Minshew's in at quarterback, and that could be for the rest of this season. So Pittman's going to have a fair amount of targets and put up a ton of points while he's pairing up with Gardner Minshew. The other guy you mentioned, Brett, Josh Downs, solid once again. Got the touchdown for Indianapolis against Jacksonville, and a solid day overall. 5 receptions for 21 yards. Not great, but got the touchdown, and it really helped. It does also boost some confidence. 8 targets as well. So he's getting a huge target share along with Pittman. And in the running game, we did see a little bit of a swing. Taylor had a couple big plays that definitely helped his game or his output on Sunday. And Moss still is going to put in some work, but we do definitely see the swing in this offense as Taylor gets more and more healthy week after week.
Yeah, and I think it was interesting to see a guy like Zach Moss get targets. And so that was, pretty interesting. He got 6 catches, 38 yards. Taylor gets 5 catches, 46 yards on 6 targets as well. And then, it kind of just went downhill from there. Alec Pierce only got 6 targets, but at the same time, it looks like his guys are Pittman, Downs. And it's crazy because Downs is owned in only 33% of leagues because nobody listens to my ones to watch takes. And, that's kind of sad. Go out and grab Josh Downs. I don't understand why, the dude keeps getting double digits in targets and double digits in catches and double digits in fantasy points. And he's not being picked up in pretty much anything. So it doesn't make sense. Go out and grab Josh Downs. He's going to be one of the guys.
Yeah, I agree with you, Brett. The biggest thing from this game, the output or the game script, was huge for fantasy owners. They were down for a fair amount of this game and had to throw the ball. That led to a ton of targets for both the running backs as well as the receivers in this one.
Yep. So now breaking down Cleveland, though, Zach, they're not the most exciting of teams, but we did see Kareem Hunt get involved, and I think that seems to be the most notable thing of what came out of the last week. He had 12 carries, 47 yards, gets the touchdown. And Zach, is this a sign of, a slowing down of Jerome Ford, or is this a sign of a, uptick in Kareem Hunt?
Yeah, okay. So what I will say is, I was a little worried. I'm a Jerome Ford owner. But then I actually saw the stats on the day, and Kareem Hunt had 12 for 47. You know what Jerome Ford had? He had 17 for 84. So clearly he's still the number one, like getting a fair amount of work. Did end up, of course, Hunt got the touchdown, but the volume of Jerome Ford definitely boosts confidence into me. Of course, you want him to be that guy on the goal line, but I feel like we knew it when Kareem Hunt was coming back. He was the goal line guy for a ton of time. Like he was definitely getting some goal line work. And I feel like looking at Ford and Hunt, I'd still prefer Ford because of the volume. But when it comes to maybe the goal line, Hunt now definitely becomes an option.
Yeah, it was 17 to 12 in terms of carries. Jerome Ford still 17 carries, 84 yards. And so it's not like there was nothing. He almost doubled the amount of yardage. And, but Hunt still gets 12 carries. And so I think that he at least is a stash candidate, and he's owned in only 36% of leagues. I think that number will go up just over the next couple days as we head into the waiver wire tomorrow. It is a guy to keep on your radar, just in the case that Jerome Ford does go down. Listen, I think that Kareem Hunt has just proven that he can still be effective. He can still be what he was. I don't know that he's necessarily going to get that sort of role, though, yet. I think they still are willing to, wait and see more. But like we talked about way earlier, like when Chubb was rolling and Hunt was rolling, they were both able to roll together on the same team, and that's what made that team so good. I think that continues. I think that there is a path to them both being viable fantasy options, whether it's flex or running back too. I don't know that Hunt is going to be a game changer, but at the same time, he can if he starts scoring more touchdowns and continues to get that workload, he's the flex option clearly.
Yeah, Brett, I definitely agree with you. Looking at the receiver room, it was probably a tough choice to really go with anybody because PJ Walker was in at quarterback. But Amari Cooper had a solid game, a really solid game. Had a couple of deep balls that he ended up catching. 108 yards on 4 receptions. Took some deep shots and he made the catch. So that definitely helped out his fantasy day. Of course, as a Cooper owner, you want Watson back, but I mean, he's still going to end up getting targets no matter what. They're still going to be throwing him the ball. He had 8 targets the other day with PJ Walker in at quarterback. So you know what you're getting with Amari Cooper. That's a positive sign for Cooper owners.
Yeah, 4 catches, 108 yards. One of them was a 40-yard bomb. And so I think that, Amari Cooper, you're still starting him every week, and you're not really worrying about him at all.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, so now we jump to our next game. It is Buffalo at New England. And Zach, this could be a rough game here for Mac Jones, just going up against that Buffalo defense. And they're banged up and they're a shell of themselves. But I'm not really sure that Mac Jones is really much of anything. Now we have Bailey Zappi's breathing down his neck, Malik Cunningham breathing down his neck, got in for 6 snaps. Didn't throw a pass, but he did get into the game, which I think is notable. And I think the more telling thing, they not only did they elevate him from the practice squad, they signed him to a 3-year deal. So, could knock on our door, and it's a guy that they have compared to Cam Newton when he was in New England. And so, is writing the wall here for Mac Jones, and how short do you think this leash actually is?
Well, I mean, the biggest thing is their record right now. They're 1-5 for the first time since '95. So they're not used to this. And I think a quarterback change is on the horizon, because I don't think they're going to win this week. And I think it's going to be another tough outing, even though Buffalo's defense is banged up. Start the Buffalo defense this week. It's gonna be a fun one probably to watch if you have Buffalo on your roster. The one thing you could say that was positive from that game was the running game, the running back tandem of Ramondre Stevenson and Ezekiel Elliott. They both had solid games, and thank God. I traded for Ramondre Stevenson a couple weeks ago. I was so nervous. All of the volume just went down the last couple weeks. And finally, a really solid week in the end for Ramondre, and can calm some Ramondre owners down. He ended up finishing running back 6 on the week. So really good stuff from him. Got a ton of receptions out of the backfield. That's huge as well. I think the biggest thing right now is if you have any of New England's guys, it's probably just Ramondre. And then if Ramondre ends up missing a game, then you're going with Zeke. But that's about it, Brett. There's really nobody else. As long as Mac Jones is the quarterback, and as long as New England keeps going this route.
Yeah, I don't know how you can look at anybody else. I mean, listen, I would say the one guy I would potentially stash is Kendrick Bourne. That's a guy that is a potential option just from the standpoint of that they keep giving him so many targets, and eventually there will be a quarterback change, I think. And I also think that work will continue for Kendrick Bourne. So it's a guy I'd stash. Listen, I'm not putting him in right now. He's there in like 83% of leagues right now. Again, this is for one of those deeper stash, rosters. Go out and I would grab that guy, stick him on the end of your bench right now. And yeah, he might not produce right away. You'll still see him get some work. When they make that quarterback change, I think that's a guy that potentially takes over as the number one guy, and they try to feed him. But it's just quite interesting how a team like the Patriots that we've known for forever to be there, they're not really doing anything.
Yeah, it really is interesting. And you mentioned Kendrick Bourne. The targets were definitely there. The volume overall from this past week, 10 receptions for 89 yards. That's good stuff. Like you said it, though. You got to plug them in at the end of your bench. You're not all of a sudden saying, oh, wait, got to start Kendrick Bourne. Don't do that just yet. I think you need to see a little bit more, and a quarterback change could definitely help that, Brett. But with Buffalo, it's been a struggle. However, I think you still have optimism after last week because fantasy numbers were pretty solid at the end. Of course, Stephon Diggs had 16 targets, 10 receptions for 100 yards. The one thing for Buffalo is the running game was a little bit off. We saw Latavius Murray start getting a fair amount of carries. I think James Cook still had a couple more carries than Murray, but it does show that they could end up being two-headed in the backfield. That may be a worry for some James Cook owners. Allen wasn't great in this one. It wasn't a great game for him. Finished quarterback 13 fantasy this week. He did go 19 for 30. That's just not Josh Allen. So it was a bad game. You flush it and you move to the next one. And now he can probably take advantage of this New England defense that's struggled, especially without a lot of their top guys. Should be a pretty solid week, I would think, for Buffalo.
I mean, they really didn't throw to anybody except for Stephon Diggs. This was nuts. 16 targets. The next most guy was 6, and then it goes down to 4, 1, 1, 1. And so, I mean, not really spreading the ball around. I think part of that was that Kincaid wasn't in, missed the game with, an injury. And so Josh Allen he really hasn't looked like himself for a lot of these games this year. The Giants actually did a really good job of playing defense. I'm not worried about any of these guys, though. You're still playing Diggs. You're still playing Allen. James Cook did not have a great game. He had 14 carries, 71 yards, didn't get into the end zone. Still finished as the top 30 running back, so that's probably where his value is. But, he's been just up and down kind of this entire season. So, an interesting one there. But, yeah, I mean, other than that, like Gabe Davis, like he's just been totally hit or miss every single week. We spoke about that just a couple weeks ago about how everybody was so high on Gabe Davis because he finished, twice in the top 10. Like it's almost those Mike Williams games, if want to compare to, those Mike Williams games from the last couple seasons where like, yeah, he's going to have those couple games where he goes off, but you also have to, if you're a Gabe Davis owner, expect those games where he's just freezing ice cold and doesn't really get much work at all. And we saw that, he literally had 4 targets. He got 3 catches for 21 yards. That was it. And so, yeah, I mean, you're not going to be starting Gabe Davis on a very consistent basis. So my advice for any Gabe Davis owner is wait till he goes off and has one of those games and then flip him, because I don't know that he's going to have very many more games this season, just because I don't know that Josh Allen exactly has been himself. But, that said, now he goes and he has a pretty tight schedule here the next couple weeks. He gets Denver in a couple weeks. He gets New England this week, Cincinnati, whose defense has not been that great as well to come. So Josh Allen will figure out how to right the ship, I think, with a couple easy games. And, he'll be able to use his legs as well. And hopefully he can spread the ball to someone else other than just Stephon Diggs.
Yeah, definitely Thoroughbred, and maybe a guy to keep an eye on in Gabe Davis. He'd probably a ton of value right now. Maybe you could dish him off.
Yeah. So as we just spoke about, the New York Giants actually played pretty good defense against Josh Allen and Zach. I don't know that you're starting them in any capacity here in against Washington after watching that quarterback performance last week, but Saquon Barkley came back, and I think that was very notable as far as the Giants go. 20 carries, 93 yards, didn't score a touchdown, but listen, he had 5 catches or 4 catches for 5 yards, and didn't really do much from the receiving game. But I think that the rushing game is certainly back for Saquon, which is great news for Saquon Barkley owners.
Yeah, I mean, it is great. The one thing I'll say is Tyrod Taylor was in at quarterback. Obviously, it wasn't Daniel Jones. So Daniel Jones, when he is in, it's maybe going to take a little bit of that rushing value. I think the biggest thing from this game was, Saquon Barkley, really, really solid, comes back and looked like there was nothing ever wrong. I will say the one thing, he did have one big play that boosted up the stat line a little bit. So that definitely helped. I think it was a 35-yard run in the fourth quarter. So definitely helped them out in the end. But as weeks go on, you're definitely going to see a lot of Saquon, especially as long as the Giants have a record at the bottom of the league. They're going to keep riding with Saquon. They'll keep riding with their best guys. Another guy, Wan'Dale Robinson, had a pretty solid game. 8 receptions on 8 targets for 62 yards. Another guy similar, I feel like, Brett, to Kendrick Bourne, that you're holding on to. I wouldn't start him just yet. I don't know how it's going to go with the change of Daniel Jones and Tyrod Taylor. Gets the 8 receptions with Tyrod Taylor in at quarterback. Who knows what will happen if Daniel Jones is in there? Another guy just to stash on the bench right now.
Yeah, and it's a guy that for the last years they've been talking about how they want to get him more involved. They're excited about his, upside. And so you saw him kind of get used here. They compared him to Deebo Samuel when they first got him and how they wanted to use him. And, so they're going to try to get the ball into his hands. And I think that's sort of coming to fruition quite a bit here. And I'm curious to see now when Daniel Jones comes back, if they continue to go the same route. But yeah, he's available in 82% of Yahoo leagues. And so insanity to me. And yeah, definitely a guy to go get. Zach, I know we're going to talk about him in a little bit. And then as far as it goes with Darren Waller, listen, he had 5 catches for 43 yards, no touchdowns. Another game where he finishes in single digits. Another game where he doesn't finish as a top 10 tight end. Zach, is this a guy that you are buying very low in the hopes that Daniel Jones and him get it together down the stretch?
I mean, you could definitely. I won't personally be one of those people, but I think that if you're in need of a tight end, you definitely can go out and maybe buy low on a guy like Darren Waller, just because the targets are there. It just, the production is not great always. Like, he's getting targets in this offense. He's going to get targets. It's just not been great. And the biggest thing I could say is looking at the Giants so far this year, if they continue to be losing in games, that does help you because of garbage time and just trying to play catch up. Like, they're going to be throwing the ball. So I think that's a positive out of it. I think you could, if you are really, really in need for a tight end, he definitely is a super buy low target.
And yeah, it doesn't count in the stat lines, but dude should have had a touchdown to win the game at the end of the end of that one. And it was clearly pass interference, but I digress. It probably would have ended up being a Saquon Barkley rushing touchdown at the 1, but yeah, it is what it is. As far as it goes, though, with our Washington Commanders, listen, Sam Howell actually is a pretty good quarterback, and I don't know that we would have said that at the beginning of the year. And we heard Ron Rivera kind of talk about it, of how this guy is going to be our future and all of that, and everybody kind of laughed at him. But 151 yards, he got 3 touchdowns, so I think that was pretty important. Is this a potential streaming option going forward?
Yeah, he has. As long as he keeps playing this way, then definitely. It is a tougher matchup. I know the Giants have young corners, but they had a really solid game last week. I don't know how you're sitting here now, like really confident heading into this week with Sam Howell. Could be a streaming option. There's a lot of quarterbacks on a bye. Could take a shot on him, but I don't think it's going to be as easy of a matchup as people think. The good thing I would say from this past week was Terry McLaurin. Obviously, the touchdowns went elsewhere. Curtis Samuel, a couple other guys. Like Terry McLaurin still had a good amount of targets. He had 11 of them, turned it into 6 receptions, 81 yards. Didn't get the touchdown, like I said, but boost some confidence of some Terry McLaurin owners after seeing a couple other guys really getting involved and McLaurin being a little below them. It definitely is a boost to see that target share in this offense.
Yeah, completely. I mean, 11 targets is, quite a bit, especially when, a guy like Terry hasn't been amazing the whole year. Another guy you could probably go out and buy low in both Dynasty and in redraft, who's probably going to have some upside as we head towards the stretch. I don't know that Curtis Samuel is going to be a guy that makes so much noise. And yeah, he scored more points than Terry did this week, as did a couple others, and Brian Robinson. But again, not sure that I'm looking at starting really any Washington guy other than Brian Robinson this week. And potentially as a streamer is Howell. I'm not that excited about McLaurin. Listen, I understand the corners and all that, but like we just said, it's not going to be that easy of a matchup. They just kind of shut down the Bills. So, yeah,
I agree with you. It's just a guy to keep an eye on, and Sam Howell, like I said, just streaming option, maybe. I don't know about this week as the best week for him.
All right, so viewer question here: lost Richardson, Purdy, or Watson, or Watson, and trade Saquon and Goddard for Bijan, have Waller. Zach, what do you think?
So the first one where he said that he lost Richardson, would he pick Purdy or Watson? That's a tough one, Brett. Yeah, because the one thing I'll say, though, is Watson has not been healthy and wasn't fantastic when he was healthy. Purdy has been consistently great in this offense. And from a guy who last year we were like, oh, well, he's not going to get any fantasy points. There's no fantasy value there. I think there's a ton of fantasy value there. I really do. I think last week you kind of throw it out the window. But other than that, he's got weapons in this offense. He's throwing passing touchdowns. Yes, McCaffrey's going to get his workload, but Brock Purdy's doing some really solid work in the passing game. I definitely think there's a lot more value there, Brett.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Purdy has been a top 10 quarterback so far. He's quarterback 7 right now. And so, listen, the upside's there. The rushing has not been amazing, but at the same time, I'm taking Purdy. Listen, I think there's been a lot of down games that Watson has had, and he's shown, he's underthrowing things, throwing picks. And so I'm taking Purdy. I think the offense around him is the safer play. I think that'll continue. And yeah, right now he's missing McCaffrey potentially, but I think that there's just the floor is too high to not go after a guy like Brock Purdy. As far as trading Saquon and Goddard for Bijan, like we just talked about with Waller, he has Waller. Listen, Goddard had a great week. Don't get that wrong, and so. As far as Goddard goes, he's going to have those kind of weeks. And at the same time, I would probably say go after Bijan because I'm sort of set high on Saquon. Bijan, the floor is super high every single week. Waller is still going to get the volume. And so I would go for that one.
Yeah, I agree with you, Brett. I'm waiting for the burst of Bijan. Hasn't completely come yet, but I'm confident it will. And we've seen just kind of a swing in the carries since week 1. It has definitely swung from Algier getting a lot of important carries to now Bijan's getting those carries and a little bit more. The touchdowns is what's holding Bijan back a little bit. But I think as the season goes on, that's definitely going to help him. Right now, like I definitely think Dallas Goedert, he might end up being like a sell high. He was okay last week, but the week before he was really, really good. Some people are looking for tight ends. Like if you have multiple tight ends, dish one off. Like there's a ton of value elsewhere. And when it comes to Saquon, I trust Bijan in that Atlanta offense more than I trust Saquon right now in that Giants offense, just because I feel like the Giants are going to be losing. They're going to want to throw the ball a lot. And yes, Saquon could get receptions, but you'd rather trust a guy in Bijan who's getting rushing and receiving value versus Saquon, maybe just receiving value if they're down in the game.
Just some quick update from Adam Schefter as we get some breaking news. Colts nose tackle Grover Stewart is suspended without pay for 6 games for violating the league policy on performance-enhancing drugs. And so, Zach, just quickly, I mean, you know, as a D tackle, one of the top D tackles now missing. I think that probably ups the value of Jerome Ford this weekend a little bit. Probably ups the value of Kareem Hunt just a touch as well.
Yeah, Brad, that obviously losing a star player on defense, a really solid player on the line, I think definitely a boost for Kareem Hunt and Jerome Ford. I think it was a good matchup probably already. And now it definitely makes it an even better matchup for those two guys. You know they're going to get volume. It's still a question if Watson's going to even play in this one, Brett.
Yeah, and so Kareem Hunt, I think, becomes more of a priority as far as the waiver wire goes, just as far as stashing him and potentially putting him in as a flex option. But let's get to our next game. We spoke a little bit about Detroit already, so let's start with Baltimore as Detroit takes on Baltimore. In Baltimore, Lamar Jackson, he's been pretty freaking good the entire season, and another top 10 performance here. 223 yards. He goes 21 30, rushes 13 times for 62 yards. And he threw an interception, but he also got a passing touchdown. And so, listen, I think Lamar has been pretty decent this season, and he seems to be spreading the ball pretty well. You know, Flowers is to Andrews, and so handful of receivers that are getting involved, Aguilar and Beckham and Bateman. So he's doing a good job of spreading the ball around, and it was kind of the knock on him pretty early in the season that he was only going to throw it to Zay Flowers and Mark Andrews, and seemed to be the complete opposite.
Yeah, Brett, and we kind of expected this coming into this season, a more pass-heavy game for the Ravens, a more pass-heavy type offense, and Lamar's been really solid so far when it comes to fantasy. I'm a little bit on the other side when it comes to reality and if this Ravens team is really set for what they're hoping for. I think right now, though, for Lamar, you know what you're kind of getting, and he's always going to get that rushing value as well. So that definitely helps. He's gotten a ton of rushing touchdowns so far this season. So that works for you. And as long as he keeps getting in top 10, of course, you want to see a little bit more when it comes to touchdowns. I think if he feels more and more comfortable in the passing game, I think those touchdown numbers will go up, and that'll lead to maybe top 5 upside, maybe top 3 upside for Lamar Jackson, bro.
We talk about some buy low candidates on their team. Mark Andrews right now, listen, he's still getting the volume, but it doesn't seem like he's getting the catches. Hasn't scored a touchdown since week 4, where he scored 2, and he finished as tight end 2 on the week. But only 2 times that he's finished as a top 5 tight end. And so I think that a lot of Mark Andrews owners are frustrated. Some of them might actually be towards the bottom. And so it is a guy that you probably can go for as one of those contending teams towards the top of the standings and risk some of that depth to go shore up a spot tight end where you know that the floor is still kind of high for a guy like Mark Andrews.
Yeah, Brett, and some of them are smarter than others as Mark Andrews owners. I'm going to give myself a little bit of credit, and traded him after that 2-touchdown game for somebody who definitely is helping out their roster in Ramondre Stevenson now. So yeah, smart man I am. But I think it's definitely a buy low right now because it has not been a great season so far. But you know that as the season goes on, he'll get his fantasy points. There's a lot of looks at tight end and worrying of okay, can I really trust this guy at tight end? I think Mark Andrews will come into that realm in the next couple of weeks, and people will start believing him a lot more. But while we're talking about it, like Zay Flowers, he's a really, really solid option. And I feel like a guy that you're probably putting as maybe a wide receiver 2, like high end wide receiver 3. Keep putting him in your lineup because he's putting up a lot of production right now.
Yeah, he finished as wide receiver 12 last week in consensus PPR leagues. I mean, he's just been a stud. He's getting the volume, obviously. And yeah, while Lamar is spreading the ball around, he still got 8 targets, 6 catches for 50 yards, adds the touchdown. And so finishes as a top 15 wide. I think that's where his placement is right now, that wide receiver 2. And yeah, like you said on Mark Andrews, like, sell him for $1 and then buy him back for 50 cents is kind of what your strategy is, which is a great strategy. Listen, anytime you can do something like that, it's pretty good. As far as the rest of the room goes, though, probably avoiding most of them. I don't know that any of them really truly make an impact. Gus Edwards, probably not starting him right now. He's been hit and miss, him and Justice Hill. Edwards, 16 carries, 41 yards. And Hill had 8 carries for 35 yards, no touchdowns for either. And so, yeah, they're on your rosters, but you're not really doing anything with them, I think, right now.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you, Brett. And when it comes to Detroit, we talked about them before. It's while Montgomery's out, I think Gibbs is probably a RB3. He's a flex option for me this week, just because of the matchup against Baltimore, a little bit on the tougher side. I think Jared Goff could be a option to look at this week. I know it's a little bit tougher, but if there's one weakness to me in Baltimore's defense, it's their secondary and their cornerbacks. It's not great. Like there definitely is some room for improvement for Baltimore there. I think a Detroit offense that's rolling right now will definitely get an edge on them, especially with the weapons that they have in Amon-Ra as well as Sam Laporta. And like I said, it's going to be a solid game for Baltimore or for Detroit, excuse me, in my mind.
Yeah, I mean, there's a handful of guys that you're starting in here, you're rostering in here. I think this offense is rolling. And so, yeah, you're probably going after a number of them. Sam Laporta, another game, another amazing target error in there, 11 targets. He only had 4 catches, which was a bit of a bummer, but you still are impressed with the amount of targets that he got. He's still going in your lineup, obviously, and in a situation like the tight end position is. Josh Reynolds had catches for 50 yards. I think he's, an iffy potential roster stash guy that could go off in a couple of weeks, especially as we figure out if Amon-Ra is in fact healthy, which obviously last week he proved that he was, but seems to have been banged up multiple times this season already. Then as far as Jameson Williams goes, listen, I think that to me was very eye-opening because they were able to use him in the slot. And yeah, he only got 3 targets, but 2 of them went for catches. 1 of them went for the big touchdown. I think he proved that he could have some sort of role in this offense, and they can utilize him out wide and in the slot and kind of rotate it a bit with Amon-Ra, which is what they did this past weekend. Jared Goff, though, I mean, what could we say? Jared Goff, another top 5 performance as a quarterback. You're rolling out there every week. I don't know that you can't go against Jared Goff right now.
Yeah, I mean, it also depends on who you have. If like I'm in a tough spot, I have Goff and Herbert, so it's not easy picking between those two guys. They're both monsters, and it'll be another tough week of picking between them. But I do like your point on Jameson Williams, a guy I picked up just because he was sitting there. Pick him up, throw him on the end of your bench for now. Like this guy could turn into something, especially as long as Detroit keeps throwing the ball around.
And especially as he gets more healthy, like, listen, we talked about how he came back from the suspension and all of that, but you got to remember he was coming off an ankle injury in the preseason and before the suspension even hit. So he wasn't allowed in the team building until about a week before he got back on the field to do sort of rehab, which is why they've limited his snaps the first couple of weeks. And so I think that those numbers will start to go up in terms of snap share and snap counts and those kind of numbers. I think he'll get more involved in the offense.
Yeah, definitely a guy to keep an eye on.
All right, so now let's break down our next game. And Zach, we talked a little bit about Chicago, but briefly, are you starting anyone this week?
For Chicago, it's just the guys that we mentioned. It's Roschon Johnson and DJ Moore, because you kind of have to. That's literally the reason for it. I think Roschon is, as long as he's healthy and assuming that he's playing in this one, he's going to be the top running back. I do think D'Onta Foreman has a tiny bit of value, but I wouldn't feel comfortable starting him in this one.
Yeah, I agree. Listen, he had 15 carries last week for 65 yards. I think this is going to end up being Roschon, though. Yeah, it's a very scary sort of game there for Chicago. And listen, it might be very scary on the other side of the field. But I would say, just to cap it up on Chicago, Max Crosby, I think, will be in the backfield a lot for Las Vegas. A very good pass rusher, and so might make a young quarterback's day hell. But now, just in terms of Vegas, it might be a scare as well at quarterback, and that is because Jimmy Garoppolo seems to have been injured in the game. He left in the middle of the game, got taken to the hospital via ambulance Sunday night, and underwent some follow-up tests on Monday for his back, and they're going to be cautious with him. I'm not sure that he is going to play this week, and so we might get an Aiden O'Connell game. Zach, what does that mean? Does it just mean Josh Jacobs galore?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, Brett, because it could be a Aiden O'Connell game, but we did see Brian Hoyer come in in place of Jimmy Garoppolo, so who knows who it's going to be. I think it's a Josh Jacobs game, though. Like you said, Chicago, I mean, the defense played really solid last week. They still ended up giving up a fair amount of points. The big pick six for Minnesota really helped them in overall winning the game. I think Chicago's defense played solid, but I'd be full go on Josh Jacobs. Devontae wasn't great last week, and it's because he was going up against New England. They're focusing in on the top target. Didn't help that Jimmy G went out midway through. I think you're starting Devontae no matter who's playing at quarterback. There's just too much upside there, and the floor I feel like is good enough even with anybody playing quarterback for Devontae.
Yeah, I just wanted to take a look back. Week 4, the game where Jimmy Garoppolo last missed, and they did have Aiden O'Connell in there. It was a Josh Jacobs game. He had 17 carries, 58 yards, and a touchdown. He had 8 catches for 81 yards on 11 targets, and he finished with about 30 points in PPR leagues. Devontae, he ended up getting 13 targets, 8 catches for 75 yards, and the rest of the team was just kind of nothingness. And so I think that that's sort of what they're going to lean into now coming in to week 7, especially if Jimmy G is not there. No matter who is at quarterback, because I think that, like I said last week, in terms of Devontae not getting much work, that continued. And so obviously it took for Jimmy Garoppolo to come out of the game for that to happen, only getting 5 targets. And so I don't know that that's going to happen every single week. Listen, I understand when they double him and triple him and whatever, but we're playing the Chicago Bears week. I mean, it's not like you're playing this top tier defense. I think Devontae gets very, very heavily involved. And Josh Jacobs, though, is the guy leading the way.
Yeah, I agree with you, Brett. And just quickly, Jacoby Myers is probably maybe a stay away. I know it's hard to really bench a guy like Jacoby Myers who's been so good, but we talked about it. New England's focus in that game was to take away Devontae. They did so, and that's led Vegas to go to Jacoby Myers. I don't think that's happening again this week against Chicago. I think the game script's going to be a lot different than it was in the New England game. So I think Jacoby Myers, you may have to downgrade him. You might have to start him as a flex. I think I'm okay with that.
Completely. As we go to our final 1 o'clock game on the window, it is Atlanta at Tampa Bay. And Zach, I think we have to start in Atlanta. It was Drake London, 9 catches on 12 targets, 125 yards, no touchdown. But it didn't really matter for Drake London owners who have just been craving this sort of performance. Zach, what could we say about Drake London, and do you start him next week?
Drake London is officially a sell high, Brett. That's what I can say. But seriously, like a really, really good game for Drake London. Definitely needed. Just because of the season, it's been a little wonky. And I mean, it just proved that Desmond Ridder is looking for Drake London. So that works for London owners. I don't know if they're going to be consistent on this, because I feel like they're more of a run-heavy team than a pass-heavy team. However, in the last couple of weeks, they've been dishing the ball around a ton, and I think that definitely helps Drake London's case as a fantasy wide receiver. Like probably in a mix between wide receiver 3 range and like flex consider. Like I think he's still in that area even after a week like this. Definitely a sell high guy though right now, Drake London, just because of the production that he's put up the last couple of weeks. Maybe you can grab one of those top guys in a deal.
Completely. I think that I agree with you from a redraft standpoint. Drake London, completely a sell high. I'm not sure he's going to get that kind of output. Just what we've seen over the first number of weeks. And obviously, like it took for this game where he just kept getting wide open. How are they not going to throw him the ball? And we saw that what happened with DJ Moore when he played against Washington, and so the guy went off for 200 yards. So it was a seller out here. It definitely did boost Ridder's value this week. So another guy who finished as a top 5 quarterback, which I didn't really see coming. I'm kind of staying away from Ridder. Don't know that he's the option going forward. I was a little disappointed still in Kyle Pitts, and yes, he got 6 targets, 4 catches, finally scored a touchdown, so you can't be that disappointed. But at the same time, I'm a little more realistic. It's probably a high on Kyle Pitts as well.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I'm trying to get rid of him right now. So I'm in the process. I'm like, it's okay. Keep putting up points though, because I have Sam Laporta, and he's a lock in my lineup already, Brett.
There you go. And as the Bijan show, it rolls on. I think that it's going to roll on even as they go play against a tough, dingy kind of defense like Tampa Bay is. Bijan is the focal point of the offense. And I think that, they'll probably try to figure it out how to stop him. But sometimes you can't stop him. You can only hope to contain him.
Exactly, Brett. And I mean, you just got to keep being confident in Bijan. I know the numbers aren't fantastic, but like the receptions out of the backfield is huge each and every week. The one thing you're just waiting for is touchdowns, and I think those will come in the next couple of weeks.
Yep, and then on the other side of the field is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and it starts at quarterback, and I don't think Baker Mayfield's that good of a quarterback. He went 19 of 37, 206 yards, and he interception, and so finished with single digits. He's kind of off the radar for me. And Zach, is this kind of dragging down the value of what a Mike Evans or a Chris Godwin has?
I mean, it could a little bit, but it was just I feel like this week was a really tough matchup. It really was. Like, give Detroit credit. They are a really solid defense. They worked on that and kind of made it a little bit better. Just their one thing is there's some games where they'll just forget to guard people, and all of a sudden they'll let up 35 points. That's their one problem. And if that, like, they're a really solid defense otherwise. It was a solid week, I would say, for a guy like Godwin. 6 receptions, 77 yards. Of course, you want a little bit more, but you're going to take that from Godwin. The consistency is always there. When it comes to Evans, he's in more of a big play ability type of range. And if it's not a big play in this one, like, it's going to hurt his value. 4 for 49. The target share is really good. They had to throw the ball a lot. So he did end up with 10 targets, but only 4 receptions definitely hurts it a little bit for Evans owners. I still trust them going into this week. They're on their home field. They're playing Atlanta. It's not like Atlanta is unbelievable in the secondary. We saw Sam Howell basically pick them apart for a couple touchdowns last week. I'm a little more confident than you are this week with Tampa Bay. I think it's a solid matchup for them.
So Mike Evans, listen, he finished in the first 3 weeks wide receiver 12, wide receiver 1, and wide receiver 20. So 3 straight week top 20 performances. His last 2 games, wide receiver 57 and wide receiver 46. Not amazing number. And when you look at a guy like Chris Godwin, somebody who everybody was very high on, he had finished in the top 30 except for a week. And so to me, it's nuts to rank Chris Godwin super high. He's a sell high on name value for me. I don't know that he's going to do much. Finishing wide receiver 46, 54, 49. Then that, wide receiver 14 week where he had 11 targets, 8 catches for 114 yards against New Orleans. And then they had the bye week. And then he finished as wide receiver 31 this past week. And so, it's nothing special for me. I'm not a big believer in the quarterback. And so therefore, I'm not a big believer in this whole offense because I don't know that even a running back shot hasn't really proven to be much of anything this year.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair, Brett. I think Rachaad White probably a buy low, definitely a pretty buy low. I think that's just a guy maybe who people have kind of just given up on. I think game script hurt him in this one. Only 7 carries. They were down for most of the game. Still a guy who in this offense, if they start cruising along, I think he could get a fair amount of fantasy points.
Yeah, completely. Another guy who guys have given up on is Najee Harris, and we will break him down in this matchup. Pittsburgh at LA. Zach, it's the run game going up against this Aaron Donald-led defensive front. And Najee, he had 14 carries for 37 yards. Another game where he can't really get it done. Jaylen Warren adding 9 carries for 40 yards. And as far as the reception goes, it was Warren over Najee. Najee only gets 1 catch for 3 yards. Warren with 3 catches for 39 yards. And so is the tide kind of turning here a bit here on Warren versus Harris?
I mean, it could. They were on the bye last week, so we'll kind of see what went on, what was going on during that bye week in Pittsburgh. I do think Warren is kind of creaking into that value of Najee, and it could end up being another one of those games where Warren's the more efficient back. LA's got a very solid front. Of course, Aaron Donald's still there leading the way for the Rams on defense. It's not going to be easy to get through this front line for LA, for Najee at least. I think some passing out of the backfield is definitely in store for Jaylen Warren. The one thing I'm excited to see, Deontay Johnson, Brett. He might be back this week. Might. Still a question mark if he'll play this week. But I feel like if you have Deontay, why not start him? He's a flex guy for me right now. He's just proven that as long as Pickett's the quarterback, like, he's probably Pickett's top option. I know he's been out since week 1, but a guy that I'm confident will get his share of volume, especially in this matchup.
Yeah, I think that Deontay Johnson, he was designated to return from IR. They opened up his 21-day window, and he said he does want to return this week. And so, yeah, I think that if he is in the lineup, then you're starting him. Obviously, you're probably starting Kins right now just as a flex option. Could have the upside of a wide receiver too. But I would stay him obviously, and then probably avoiding the backfield right now. I'm not sure that they're really making any sort of noise.
Yeah, Brett, I agree with you. And we'll look at the Rams quickly. It's a weird one with Kyron Williams probably out this week. There's a lot of people on the waiver wire going to get Zach Evans. I don't know if it's going to be a great matchup. Like, yes, Pittsburgh hasn't been great against the run, but their defensive front is pretty solid. I think when you look at the overall outlook for LA, they're going to be throwing the ball. Like if Matthew Stafford is playing, Cooper Kupp's playing, Puka Nacua is playing, and Kyron Williams is out, they're going to be dishing it to those guys that they really trust. I think those three guys are really on the radar for fantasy, especially. I think we talked about it before. Stafford, like a solid option for some people, especially as long as Kupp is there. Every point that Kupp gets, Stafford's getting the same. So that definitely a good duo there, and a guy to look out for in Matt Stafford.
Yeah, I think you actually have to look at potentially starting Stafford. You're definitely starting him in Superflex. It's a great streaming option, especially for this week against a team that's sort of struggled. Yes, it's a tougher defense, quote unquote, but at the same time, like they've struggled at times. And so I would look at starting him as a potential streaming option. Kyron Williams seems to be banged up a bit, and so does Ronnie Rivers. So kind of avoiding the backfield right now. Zach Evans right now seems to be this big name. And yeah, he was a great rookie draft pick, but he turned out to not really be that effective in preseason. I'm not really looking at putting him in. Nor am I looking at Royce Freeman, who's getting called up from practice squad, nor am I looking at any guys that they potentially come in and sign this week. I'm just avoiding the backfield completely right now. And Sean McVay is probably a little bummed out that he got rid of Cam Akers so quickly for basically nothing. As far as the receiver goes, you're starting Kupp, you're starting Puka. Was kind of interesting to see that Tutu Atwell only one catch for 30 yards. It was a guy that a couple of weeks ago was like you had to have him on your roster. He didn't really do a lot. I'm not getting rid of him so quickly. I'm going to keep him on the roster just because I think that there will be games where he starts to get a little more involved. And, listen, they sort of kind of rushed Cooper Kupp back. And so there's always the potential that there's some sort of injury again that lingers. And so especially as he's getting double and triple teamed on some of these pass catching options. And so they did find Puka Nacua quite a bit as he had set targets in this past game. And so you're probably starting them two receivers. And yeah, I would look at the quarterback as a streaming option.
Yeah, definitely agree. But the one thing with Tutu Atwell, my roster is so filled with wide receivers that he was just the odd man out. I had to drop him in the end because Deontay's coming back. It hurt me. I love Tutu. He's a very solid player, and he's definitely going to get some work in this offense, even with Kupp and Nacua there.
Yeah, and that's sort of just kind of what happens. That's the name of the game in fantasy. If you have a guy at the end of the bench, there's the expectation that he's your most movable target, whether it's via trade or waivers or basically just saying see you later. Just a quick comment here from one of our viewers, Dre, and I think he made a great point. We sort of talked about it earlier. Anthony Richardson needs to learn from Lamar Jackson and Jalen Hurts and be a smart runner and avoid hits. Richardson is playing like a power runner, RG3, and that's not good, which I agree with. Listen, he's lowering his shoulder at every single chance that he gets, and it's going to lead to injury. And we saw RG3's career just go boom like that, and hopefully, knock on wood, the same does not come about with Anthony Richardson, though.
Yeah, agreed, Brett. And just that we talk about it, leaning into guys with his shoulder. Like that caused the injury just now. So, I mean, probably out for the year. He definitely needs to change his play style because he could be a really, really solid player in the NFL for years to come.
Yeah, and I'm sure that that will go into the fact he's missing the year. A little bit of an eye opener. What could he have done differently? I think that will change quite a bit in terms of sliding, and want some tape on those running quarterbacks like Lamar.
Yeah, definitely agree.
All right, so we continue through the 4 o'clock window, and we have Arizona at Seattle. Zach, let's start out in Arizona, and it's Josh Dobbs. He finally comes down to earth after what had just been like an amazing stretch of games. Finishes at quarterback 20. At the same time, you can't really fault them. Are you starting him this week against Seattle?
It's a good matchup, Brett. It really is. Seattle lets up a lot of yards, but I don't know. I'm a little iffy on it. A little iffy on Josh Dobbs. I get it. I like the hype. It's good for him, but I feel like there's just better options. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. But I think looking at this week's matchup, a name that I brought up last week that I'm going to probably end up starting in one of my bigger leagues this week, Keontae Ingram. Seattle has the worst running defense in the NFL so far this season. The worst. And I think Keontae Ingram proved last week that he's probably the top guy in the running back room while James Conner's out. Obviously, DeMercado is there too, but Keontae Ingram had the better game, and he's definitely the guy in my mind. DeMercado had 2 carries, Brett, for 11 yards. Keontae Ingram had 10 carries. So that just proves I think he's the number one. He's a streaming option. Like I said, I have a lot of guys on bye weeks. He's a guy I'm looking at to start this week.
Yeah, what's interesting is that Damian Williams actually finished with 9 touches. He had 8 carries for 36 yards, had an 8-yard catch as well. So he actually outproduced DeMercado, who was this huge waiver ad, and it was sort of this mirage that he was going to be the guy, and it ends up being Ingram. This is sort of a 3-headed monster, but yeah, it seems to be that Ingram is the lead guy of the 3. Josh Dobbs, just back quickly on him, sort of interesting just based on the fact that I think that he's one of those like lower end quarterback 2. If you're in a bind and you're on the bye week, bye Mageddon, and you need a guy, like he's a solid guy to put in. There are weeks that he has gone off. It's again not a bad matchup. He is a guy that has been pretty good at rushing the ball as well. And so, yeah, going against Seattle, who let up a lot of space by their secondary, I think that there's the potential that Dobbs can get some rushing yards here. And as far as the receivers go, it was sort of a mixed bag where it was like Trey McBride, Rondell Moore, Hollywood Brown, all sort of split how many receptions they got. Hollywood Brown obviously got the bulk of the targets, couldn't really get the bulk of the catches, though. That I think is quite a bit of an issue. Rondell Moore, same thing. And, listen, that comes with the territory of having a guy like a Josh Dobbs playing a quarterback rather than like an Aaron Rodgers. But at the same time, I don't know how you could 1,000% trust those sort of guys. But at the same time, I think that Marquise Hollywood Brown has been a top 20 receiver. Basically, this was his worst performance of the year, and he still got 11 targets. So probably putting him in your lineup and, not really worrying about it. You're kind of throwing the tape away.
Yeah, I agree with you. The Hollywood Brown is a really solid option right now, like a really trustworthy option. He's probably the top target for Josh Dobbs, I would say, and it's a solid matchup this week. Seattle's let up a lot of yards to a lot of receivers, a lot of yards to running backs. I think it could be a good week for a couple of different Arizona guys. Quickly with Seattle, Brett, I think looking at this matchup, Geno hasn't been great. Like he was bad last week. They had some big 4th downs. He just could not get the job done. And just could not find his guys. And credit to Cincinnati's defense, but I feel like it takes Geno a little bit off the starting and QB1 type of radar. If you have Geno as your starter, probably time to look for another quarterback. Maybe somebody stashed on the bench. Like, you probably need to move away. I think this is kind of the signal for that. But everybody else, I mean, Kenneth Walker, solid. Again, got the touchdown for the day. DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, you're probably starting both of them unless you have some better option, which probably not for DK. You're clearly starting him. Lockett, we talked about before, a couple of different options, but a flex play with wide receiver 2 upside each and every week. And they're at home in this one. So a lot of confidence in front of that crowd. I think the offense will be rolling.
Yeah, listen, I think Geno right now is a potential buy candidate, but at the same time, I don't know that he has such amazing value. And the reason is because, you fast forward a little down the schedule. It's a great matchup this week against Arizona. Great plug and play option and all of that. You go to weeks 11 through 14, and it's the Rams, it's the Niners, it's at the Cowboys, and it's at San Francisco again. And so, you play the Niners twice, the Rams offensive or defensive front, and then you got Micah Parsons. And so, not such long-term value on Geno, and I tried to buy low on him, and the owner turned me away. And that's all well and fair because it's a great matchup this week for him. He is a guy that should be in most lineups this week, especially as we hit the bye week for most of the quarterbacks. I think that this could be one of those get-right games for Geno, and just based on the fact that he's got a ton of weapons. I mean, we just spoke about Tyler Lockett a bit before. DK Metcalf, he only had 4 catches for 69 yards, got 10 targets, though. I think that sort of gets right as well. And Kenneth Walker, listen, he's been amazing. He had 9 carries, 62 yards, and a touchdown. I'm looking forward to that continuing. And maybe even a little bit of Zach Charbonnet involved. Seeing the snap counts go up. Haven't really seen the carries go up, but more so from the pass blocking. I think that Charbonnet might get a couple more carries in this one as they start to get him more acclimated to carrying the ball.
Yeah, definitely a fair, Brett. Let's head to Denver.
Yeah, so we head to Denver, and I think, Zach, we have to start with the Green Bay Packers and Jordan Love. Wasn't an amazing game coming off, and obviously they had the bye last week, but going back to week 5, they were missing Aaron Jones. They were coming in to a prime game against Vegas, and Jordan Love was okay. Listen, he threw 3 interceptions down the stretch, and you can't really fault him for at least 2 of them. But it's a potential guy that you can, again, if you're in a bind, like, I don't think that Jordan Love is bad, and now he actually has a really good matchup.
I was going to say, he's a streamer this week. Like, they have a really good matchup. We've talked about it week after week. If there's a team that you're looking for right now to play against, it's the Denver Broncos. Like, their defense lets up too many yards all the time, and it's going to be a good fantasy week. I'm full go as on the Green Bay Packers as long as these guys are healthy. Aaron Jones missed a couple weeks ago. Christian Watson's back healthy. You're starting him. I'd probably even consider Romeo Doubs as an option. I think those 4 are really sticking out to me. If you really need a tight end, Luke Musgrave hasn't been great, but maybe a get right matchup. Like, there's a lot of different ways you can go with this matchup in Denver. And like I said, I'm full go with Green Bay this week.
Yeah, so just briefly on Musgrave, listen, all of the usage metrics put forward show that he will eventually be a tight end 1. And so I would say at this point, he's only owned in 25% of leagues, and he's probably going to be a tight end 1 at some point. So it's a guy that you should probably go pick up and stash if you have the room at the end of the bench, because his usage is through the roof. He's getting all the targets. It's just about getting into the end zone. He had 6 catches, 34 yards on 7 targets in week 5 against Vegas. Jordan Love's a streamer this week. Listen, we talked about it just a couple weeks ago with the Jets, and how when they were playing against Denver, look what it did for them. They went out and they beat the Philadelphia Eagles this past week. That win propelled them to an even greater win. I think that sort of is what we'll see here. Not to knock the Broncos, I think that season's over. I don't know that they've done very much to prove that they're going to be this team that's going to get back into it. I think that Green Bay has the advantage here. I think that their defense is going to kind of shut down Russell Wilson. And so, yeah, I'm taking the Packers just in general. But as far as the receivers go, like, yeah, you're starting Watson. Aaron Jones is back likely. We'll follow the updates throughout the week, but he was back in practice after the bye week. And so he's going back in your lineup, which means A.J. Dillon is going back to your bench. And then, yeah, I would pick up Luke Musgrave completely because I think that the upside is too great to leave him out there for 75% of the league to have it. Dobbs, probably not starting him this week. He's a boomer bust flex option, I would say, just based on the fact of he didn't really get a ton of work in the last couple games. And so, yeah, I mean, obviously bye week, which is why I say boomer bust flex option. Like if you're in a bind and you got to put him in your flex, then I would say that that's probably where he belongs.
Yeah, definitely fair, Brett. For Denver, I'm just on Javonte, and I feel like that's it. Like I don't know. I'm just not confident right now. I think Cortland Sutton, of course, you're probably going to keep starting him because he's just getting the target share with Russ. I am completely over Jerry Jeudy. I don't know what to do. You can't really trade him because nobody's going to want him. But I mean, the biggest thing right now is with Jeudy, he's not getting a ton of targets anyways. So the receptions are not great because the targets are not great. Like I definitely can't put him in my lineup right now. He's going to sit on my bench until he proves me wrong. I think Sutton as well as Javonte. I think that's about it.
Yeah, not to out this person, but I guess by somebody in our Dynasty League about their value on Jerry Jeudy and the potential of trading Jerry Jeudy, and I wouldn't sell because I think his value is so low right now. You can't really get much back for him. And so, yeah, you kind of just have to hold this play in Dynasty because the price is just super low. You need one of those really good games that gets the value back up, gets people talking about it. I think the Steve Smith thing from the last week also didn't exactly help his case in terms of his reputation. Yeah, Cortland Sutton, listen, he's getting work, but at the same time, like he made 4 catches last week. And, yes, it was a touchdown. He got it down to B, but 4 catches for 46 yards. The touchdown is what really saved the day for him. If not, it's, an abysmal day. I'm kind of just staying away from everybody right now. Yeah, Javonte, I would probably start him. He'd be the only one that I would look at because they're starting more work. However, the caveat to that is if they do go down in the game, I don't know how many carries he's going to get because you're going to have to throw the ball. So, you're playing, it's almost like the devil on one shoulder, the angel on the other, saying play him, no, don't play him. That's kind of my feeling here on Javonte, just based on the entire offense.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely fair. I think I'm just hoping right now that the Broncos start trading guys and then Jerry Jeudy's value goes up a little bit more.
Yeah, you would think. And then obviously if they don't have any guys, then Javonte just gets all the carries and every.
That's fair. It works for me.
Hand it to Javonte.
Exactly.
All right, so jumping to our next game, it is the LA Chargers taking on the Kansas City Chiefs. And Zach, I think what everybody really wants to know is Taylor Swift going to be at this game at Arrowhead Stadium?
Probably. It's in Kansas City.
Probably. She likes going to Kansas City. Just quickly on the Chiefs here. Here's Kelsey. I mean, Kelsey had 9 catches on 9 targets, 124 yards. It was a great game for him. Finally, a big game out of Travis Kelsey. And then after that, it was a little different, just in terms of how the number one receiver goes outside of Travis Kelce, like it was sort of kind of a mixed bag. It was 3 catches for Kadarius Toney, 4 catches for Rashee Rice, 3 catches for McKinnon, 2 catches for Sky Moore, 2 catches for Gray, a catch for Edwards-Helaire. And so 6 catches for Isaiah Pacheco was what ended up being the leading pass catcher outside of Travis Kelce, which was interesting. I don't know that I'm excited about anyone outside of Travis Kelce. Yes, you're playing Pacheco, but I think Pacheco's proven his value as a running back, 2 at least, with the upside of having some weeks where he finishes at running back. Rashee Rice, listen, we spoke about him a ton of weeks. The upside's there. And that's the only thing you can really bank on, is that the upside is there. I don't know that any other receiver on the Chiefs has the potential upside for there. So, yeah, you're putting Rashee Rice in. I'm not starting him, though. It's just basically just stashing him. Stash him till further notice and hope and pray that he gets this confidence with Patrick Mahomes. And then obviously, yeah, you're starting Patrick Mahomes. So we don't have to talk about him.
Yeah, just quickly, Brett. I think the biggest positive I could say is there's upside for Rashee Rice because of the matchups. I mentioned it a couple of weeks ago. There's stretch that Kansas City has. Like, they have some really solid matchups. And although Rashee Rice wasn't great a week ago, the upside against a team like the Chargers, who just let up so many yards to CeeDee Lamb yesterday, like there's a chance that Rashee Rice has a solid game. I think Kansas City will probably just go to their regular guys and Pacheco and Kelce. I think that's probably what I'm expecting from this game, and they're at home. I think that's probably the safe options with Mahomes, of course, in at quarterback. I will say for the Chargers, good to see Eckler back. It was a tough matchup against the Dallas defense, so I'm not going really off of that matchup. I think he's going to be solid. Like, he's going to be Austin Eckler. He'll get comfortable in this offense. Of course, Herbert had the pick yesterday, but I feel like it wasn't a bad game. He had that interception at the end that hurt it, but it definitely the touchdowns helped. He was running out of the backfield, which also helped. So as that goes on, it definitely a lot of value there. And of course, Keenan Allen. You're trusting Keenan Allen right now because he's Keenan Allen, and there's no Mike Williams. So why not keep going with him? It's a weird situation at tight end. Gerald Everett wasn't great yesterday. He got the touchdown. Maybe a flyer. It depends on if Donald Parham is back. I feel like that's what we've seen so far this year. That really depends on what's going on at tight end.
Yeah, just quickly on Patrick Mahomes. He's only finished one time in the top 5 quarterbacks, which I think is very eye-opening. Potentially a buy low guy. I mean, listen, there's those teams right now that, again, they have the quarterback, but they don't have anything around them. It is a potential to go after a guy like Mahomes. And listen, we spoke about it last week. I was able to actually trade for him in Dynasty, and I felt like it was a buy low, and I still traded 2 first rounds to get him, plus players. And so, yeah, I mean, the jury's out on Mahomes just as far as the rest of this season because of whether he'll be able to consistently get those top 5 finishes. I'm sure they'll come, but, it's a little scary there for Mahomes owners just because it's Travis Kelce or bust, it seems like, most weeks. But just going over to the Chargers and, as far as the receivers go, Keenan Allen, he's been a beast. 7 catches, 85 and a touchdown. He had 11 targets, so that was great. Gerald Everett, he also had a touchdown. I thought that was pretty great towards the end of the game. A guy that's been a tight end 2 with tight end 1 upside. I think that sort of is what continues here as we move forward. A guy that should be stashed because he's out there in 75% of leagues. And so as we start to head into these bye weeks where you need a tight end, he's a great streaming option. Josh Palmer, another guy who, listen, he only had 4 catches, 60 yards, and it looks like, it was an okay game. his usage rate was through the roof. He played like 80-something% of the snaps. He had 7 targets. Couple balls were over his head. And so, listen, I think that will start to get right as well. Josh Palmer, as he starts to figure out that Mike Williams role a little bit more and have some boom games. And then as far as Eckler goes, listen, Eckler came in and everybody was expecting this huge output. It'll come. It'll come. He had 14 carries, 27 yards, 4 catches for 35 yards. They'll come. I don't know that he was ready to just hit the ground running right away. He finished as just outside the top 30. I think the usage will come, and I'm really not worried about it.
Yeah, definitely fair, Brett. Let's get through these last couple of games quickly.
Yeah, so the night games here and what should be just, I think, an absolute shootout. The Miami Dolphins taking on the Philadelphia Eagles. First, let's just quickly break down down the pike earlier today. Julio Jones signed with the practice squad of the Philadelphia Eagles, and they say that he will be elevated pretty quickly onto the team. Zach, does he have any sort of fantasy relevance being the number 3 guy there in Philadelphia?
No, he does not. Don't go running to pick up Julio Jones. I don't think it's anything.
I agree. I think that it's one of those guys that, yeah, he's a name and all that, but this is going to be the A.J. Brown show, and Devonta Smith will have his games as well. And, just quickly on them, Hurts, obviously, you're keeping him in. A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, he didn't have a bad game. He still had 11 targets and actually had more targets than A.J. Brown did. A.J. Brown made the most of his with 7 catches for 131 yards. Devonta Smith only had 5 catches for 44 yards. And so you're probably still putting them both in your lineup. As far as Swift goes, he had 10 carries for 18 yards, and that's where it was a little scary. But he still scored through the air, which did save his day against the Jets. So he's still an RB1 for me. You're still putting him in there if you have him on your team.
Yeah, I agree with you, Brett. The biggest thing for Swift was the matchup. The Jets are a really tough run defense. Miami is actually one of the worst run defenses in the NFL. So he could have a really good week. I think the same for Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts had maybe the worst game of his career, Brett. He still finished quarterback 2. Unreal.
It's unbelievable. I mean, what he's been able to do this season is great. I think that he is past Patrick Mahomes right now, just in terms of rest of season value. I wouldn't go as far as to say dynasty value, but I would say rest of season value. I think that he is surpassed Mahomes.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think looking at Miami quickly, you're rolling out the regulars. Tua, along with Mostert, because he must start now once again, and Tyreek Hill as well as Jalen Waddle. Those guys keep going. I think it's a tougher matchup, but in this offense, they'll keep getting points no matter what.
Yeah, I've seen that Salvin Ahmed is actually a potential guy to go pick up just based off of, similar qualities to Devon Achane. And so, there is the potential. He did have a touchdown last week. He had 6 carries on 23 yards, scored the touchdown, also added 3 catches. And so, yeah, there's some upside there as well. And potentially, again, in those deeper leagues, you might want to go out and grab him and stash him on the end of your bench just in case he goes off. Because, listen, this team right here is just – they're scoring so many points, and it's coming from every which way. So anytime you can get any sort of piece on the of the action, you try to go get it.
Yeah, definitely agree with you.
All right, so now we break down our final matchup. Monday Night Football, San Francisco 49ers at the Minnesota Vikings. Zach, let's just start out with San Francisco. And we spoke about it at the top of the show, Christian McCaffrey. And if he can't go, it's sort of this 2-headed monster. I'm staying away from both of them. I will be starting those receivers, though, Brandon Ayuk, as well as Deebo Samuel. And, yeah, if you have George Kittle, you're praying to, the fantasy gods that he gets in the end zone, himself going. it didn't really happen this last week. He kind of came crashing back down to earth. But at the same time, Brock Purdy, like we spoke about, he's a quarterback one.
Yeah, I really think right now, Brett, Purdy's probably on a bunch of rosters, but if he isn't for some reason, he's definitely a streaming option this week. A great matchup against Minnesota. May not have McCaffrey, and he's going to be throwing the ball. So everything you want from him as a streaming quarterback, if he's on the waiver wire, like definitely go get him. It's going to be a really solid game this week against San Francisco. I agree with you. It's just not going to, or against Minnesota, excuse me. I agree with you. It's just not going to be a backfield to really trust as long as McCaffrey's not there. Just too many guys, and it's going to be hard to figure out what Shanahan's really going to do. I think the biggest thing for Minnesota in this game is same as always. They throw the ball a ton. And it's a hard matchup for the wides in KJ Osborne and Jordan Addison. Not going to be an easy day either for TJ Hawkinson, but they're probably going to be throwing the ball. So I think the upside is probably there in this matchup. I think they'll be down. I think San Fran's going to want to bounce back after last week's loss. They're going to be hungry to really take it to Minnesota. I would probably still be starting those guys in the Minnesota lineup. Probably Cousins if he's your starter, and then I would probably have Madison as well as Addison and Hawkinson.
Yeah, listen, Madison got 22 touches, only finished with 9 fantasy points, finished as running back 25. He is that low-end running back 2 flex option, I would say, right now. Just really hasn't been going his way, and that's sort of the reason why they've been leaning so much into pass. Addison, it was kind of surprising. He only got 5 targets on the day, and it was sort of just the matchup of how it went. They started to run the ball more down the stretch against Chicago. But yeah, you're putting him out there. You're putting Hawkinson out there. And then KJ Osborne's also a consideration as well.
Yep, definitely agree.
All right, so now let's get to our lock of the week. And these are guys that are in about the 30-ish range. Guys, you should start in your flex spot. Zach, last week you picked Christian Kirk to my KJ Osborne, and you finished with 13.9 PPR points to 8.8. You are up 4-1 in the standings, and I got some making up that I need to do. But we will give you the first pick as you won last week. Who are you taking as your lock of the week?
The guy that we talked about a ton today. Pick up Roschon Johnson if he's on the waiver wire. If he's on your roster, try and start him, because I think it's going to be all Roschon Johnson this week as Chicago, maybe without Justin Fields. They're probably without Justin Fields, and they're going up against Vegas, who lets up a lot of yards on the ground. I mentioned it before last week against New England, 4.9 yards per carry for Ramondre Stevenson and 4.4 yards per carry for Ezekiel Elliott. So, I mean, that's exactly what you need to see, and you should definitely be starting Roschon as a flex this week.
So for me, it's pretty simple. I'm going with Josh Downs, and the reason being is because of Gardner Minshew. He's proven that he is one of Gardner's favorite targets, and just pretty quickly, the game that Anthony Richardson did miss with the concussion, he had 8 catches, 57 yards on 12 targets, and just the upside. I'm chasing the upside. I'm chasing the target share. Yes, it's a tough matchup. He's playing against Cleveland. I really think that they're going to hone on trying to stop Michael Pittman. That frees up Josh Downs. And right now, Josh Downs, like I said, he's available in about 70% of leagues. And so we talked about him on our ones to watch last week. And so now he's earned a flex status for me.
Yeah, as long as Minshew's at quarterback, why not? Keep trusting Josh Downs.
Completely. And now we go to ones to watch. And like I said, I took Josh Downs last week, and he finished with 13.1 PPR points, a great week. Zach, you took DJ Chark, who only finished with 5.6. And so I take the 3-2 lead in the standings there. These are guys who we think will end up as waiver targets next week. So they have to be owned in less than 50% of leagues. And Zach, I picked Rashid Shaheed. I think that this is a guy who, listen, he has been, forgotten early in the year, and it was a guy that didn't really go in many drafts. And, he's owned in, 32% of Yahoo leagues right now. And so he had 12% of the target share, and it didn't really matter for him because he still turned it in to 85 yards and he scored a touchdown. And so he finished as wide receiver 5, went off. I think that they're going to get him more involved in the offense. And, Derek Carr's going to start looking his way just based on the fact that they're doubling Olave. We've seen the decline of Olave in the last couple weeks. And while the floor is very high on Michael Thomas, I think that he's starting to look elsewhere a little bit, Carr. And so I think that this is the opening for Shaheed. I think that last week really proved that will start to come about.
Yeah, definitely a fair assessment there, Brad. Rashid Shaheed, a guy to look out for. Definitely a deep threat. And Derek Carr has loved deep threats in the past. Rashid Shaheed, a guy to look out for. For my one to watch, it's Wan'Dale Robinson, and it could end up being this week, but I actually think it's going to be next week that he ends up getting a lot of ads in fantasy. I think this week's matchup against Washington should prove that he's maybe the number one guy. I know they've had a ton of different options, and as well as Darren Waller at tight end, of course, Saquon back. But even with Saquon back, he had 8 receptions on 8 targets against the Bills, who are one of the toughest pass defenses in the NFL. So I think looking ahead to this week's matchup, really solid matchup against Washington, a lot of yards to wide receivers, and that will set him up for maybe a couple of weeks after that where he really steps it up in this Giants wide receiver room.
Yeah, like I said earlier, like they talked about Wan'Dale when the coaching staff first got there, Brian Dable, they saw this Deebo Samuel role and trying to get the ball into his hands and, not just a gadget player, but a guy that you can use in short yardage. And, yes, you could use him on those jet sweeps and such. But, I think his target share is going to start to come. It took for Tyrod Taylor to get in there and give him 8 catches on 8 targets. I think that when Daniel Jones comes back, they're going to start to look his way. And listen, they spoke about with Daniel Jones, he's looking too often at a guy like Darren Waller, and defenses are just kind of knowing where he's going to go with the ball. I think that he's going to have to start to look elsewhere. And I think that a guy like Wan'Dale Robinson can get open. It's a great pick. Definitely a guy to go pick up.
Yeah, 100%.
All right, so that will do it this week. And Zach, we got more football coming up here, and good luck to you in Mageddon. And any last words here? I'm hoping that somebody steps up in Adam Thielen's place. He carried my teams on his back last week. Somebody step up. And just hoping that some sort of miracle comes to be with Patrick Mahomes, I would say. A guy that I've had, we need him to finish in the top 5 to boost the rest of the team up over the top teams in the league as they start to score more points. But please subscribe to us on YouTube. Give us the thumbs up. And in the words of Aaron Rodgers, the night is darkest before the sun, and we shall rise yet again. We will catch you next week. Brett Mallon and Zach Mallon here on the Third Round of Crystal Fantasy Football Podcast.